I'm hitting start stage. Oh, that is. Hang on. Well, now I have the chat open and I can't see where I go to start it. Okay, what is going on here? Like, I know it is here.
Did you start the stage, Craig?
There it is. I got it.
No, it has started.
All right.
Oh,
Event started. We should be seeing people. They, yep. I just had to find the button. My bad. All right. Well, that's great as we just let people pop in, give them a chance to acclimatize here.
Mic check real quick. Terry, can you hear me this time?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Aha. All right. Back over here. There. Close that. Welcome, our audience. Oh, this is glorious. May Duin guide you against the forces of darkness in your life, and a good evening to all. Welcome to our wonderful Wizarding Conclave on Preceptor. We have our guest, Terry Mancour, here, and we are here to have some fun, I think, today. Now, we're going to start with some opening words from Terry, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. What I would like you all to do is type your questions up in the Mongerverse Conclave VC chat. It should be the one that little appears on the right side of your screen. Absolutely. You pop it in there. If I see something really fun, we'll interrupt and we'll kind of like, hey, is this okay question to ask now? That kind of thing. But if you pop me the question in, I can try to acclimatize and get some like interesting threads going. So I hope you all just have fun adding your questions in tonight. Take it away, Terry.
Hey, everybody. First of all, I want to thank everyone for buying Preceptor. Sales have been really nice on it, and I very much appreciate that. The reviews have been, for the most part, incredibly good. The two biggest complaints are that it is too short and that it is too long. As usual, that nothing happened and that there was too much crammed in one book. It's just, pretty much par for the course. There are always going to be the 1 to 2% that are going to be fussy about whatever it is that I write, and I've come to expect that, and I think I would be shocked if I didn't get that. Overall, the comments have been incredibly positive and supportive. I think that I accomplished what I wanted to do with Preceptor, and some people claim it's just a a transitional novel, and I can't deny that, because at this point in the series, pretty much every new volume is going to be a bit of a transitional novel as we move the plot along. So I take all that criticism, and I do take it to heart, but don't always necessarily act on it, because I've got a slightly better picture of where things are going than everybody else does. So sometimes when I get a review that talks about, not enough happened in this book, I just want to chuckle to myself, because actually I thought quite a bit happened in this book, and that I think it sets things up nicely for all the things that will be happening in the next book, which I am actively writing right now. I've got about 2.5 chapters and probably 20 pages of tentpole scenes. For those of you who are unaware of my composition method, when I approach a new book, I try to sketch out usually 2 to 3 pages at a time, um, little scenes that I think are going to be pivotal in the book, and are really the exciting parts from a plot or character perspective. And I sketch those out first. They don't always make it into the final manuscript, but they allow me to capture the kind of excitement and the the particular plot points that I want to emphasize or the particular character development that I want to emphasize. It's interesting because for Practical Adept, a lot of my notes at this point involve the peculiarities of Faris, which have been hinted at before, um, but haven't really been explored in any depth. And this is where I explore them in depth. So I'm writing a lot about the background and that sort of thing, and very excited for it. This is Faris is a kind of semi-tropical area, which is not a place that you get a lot of epic fantasy set in. And so the some of the basic understandings of the feudal universe get shifted when you take it out of a more temperate climate and into a hotter climate. Anybody who's lived in Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, California, or parts south will appreciate, for example, the fact that heat and humidity are just part of everyday life, and so much of your culture is based around ways to avoid both of those things. So, um, and the idea of wearing any kind of armor in that climate is just absolutely horrible. I can attest to this, having fought in the Society for Creative Anachronism, and our kingdom, the Kingdom of Atlantia, goes to war on a yearly basis with the kingdom in Florida, the Kingdom of Trimaris. And when those battles were in Florida, in the swamps, in the humidity, and you're wearing 60 to 80 pounds of armor, it's a really miserable time. Just to let you know, and that sort of thing is something that I want to reflect in the overall background for Practical Adept. So I'm doing a lot of research with that right now, and sketching out a lot of scenes for that. But let's get back to Preceptor. That's what we're here to talk about, especially all of the exciting spoilery things that I popped up. And I will, yeah, oh yes, mosquitoes. Someone mentioned in the chat. Oh my God, the mosquitoes in Florida. Uh, uh, they're absolutely huge, absolutely vicious, and you can't scratch an armor. You can try, but they will bite you in places that you literally cannot get your hands to in the middle of it.
Mhm.
So, um, and really enjoyed those fights, but was really glad to get home afterwards. Anyway, let's get on to Preceptor, and Manchi, if you want to go ahead and throw some questions at me, I'm ready.
Our first question comes from Turl.
Good question. And this is not the first time I've been asked about the reproductive proclivities of the divinities. That is a little more complex issue. I don't think that we will see a direct offspring between the two, uh, but that doesn't mean that won't happen eventually. Like I said, things are a little weird when it comes to how the gods procreate, and it really depends more on humanity than the actual gods. Um, when you're dealing with divinities that are basically thought forms that are pulled from the human collective subconscious, it will only be the human collective subconscious that determines whether or not a new divinity is required, or desired. Um, but a lot of weird things happen on Calidor, and I'm not going to say that it won't happen. Just probably not from this particular interlude. A good question.
Yeah,
I
funny. She
did
doesn't look
actually. I did.
Jewish.
Um, and it's interesting because Duin and Ishi are patterned roughly on Ares and Aphrodite from Greco-Roman mythology.
Mhm.
And a lot of people forget that while Zeus had many children, Zeus and Hera only had two in the mythologies, and those were Ares and Hephaestus. Those were the only two legitimate Olympians from the marriage of Zeus and Hera, which I've always found intriguing from a mythological standpoint. That war and industry are what is naturally generated from a properly constituted family in the classical sense. Um, and everything else is just bastardy. Uh, so I may run with that concept at some point, but as I'm writing the characters, I do kind of try to keep that in the back of my mind. And since we lack a specifically Hephaestus-like character at this point, there are other smithy gods out there, um, but right now, I think I'm just going to focus on uh, uh, the fact that the Hera Zeus kind of um, dynamic produces at least war, if nothing else. So we'll run with that for the moment. Next question.
Our next question comes from Wolfie Girl, who I'm going to invite to speak here. Hopefully they would like to join us. Hello.
I think she needs to unmute.
Yes. Oh, I might not have a mic. I should have checked with that. A lot of these are going to be, I'm grabbing them out of the chat and be like,
there
hey,
we go,
you're
Mandy.
next.
Sorry,
Mandy, there
Hello.
we go.
I'm always muted for Discord.
That's fine.
Hey, Wolfie
Topic.
girl, what can
So yeah, my question was, how is Calidor in comparison to Earth, size wise? And I don't know if I couldn't expand on that, but also what kind of sun does Calidor have? Interested in that as well.
excellent question. And I have the specifics written down in my notes. At this point, though, after this many books, there are a lot of notes. Basically, Calidor is slightly larger than Earth by about, I think it was like 4 to 6% larger. But the mass is a little off because Calidor has more water than Earth does, which sounds weird because the surface area that the water covers is actually slightly less. I parsed all this out in detail towards the beginning of the series just so I would know what I was dealing with and try to stay relatively consistent about it. And it may not, my figures may not jive completely scientifically, which is why I use a lot of feudal sort of estimations whenever I can to keep from getting pinned down on exact numbers. But I believe Calidor's surface area, total surface area, is about 4% larger than Earth's. But the volume of water is larger, which has all sorts of consequences, especially when you add in a double moon system. The sun is, I believe, a G3 class star. I played around with making it an F series, which is kind of a greenish, more greenish star. But I didn't want to screw with the human colonists too terribly much, so I think I picked a G3 just to keep it as relatively close to uh, the our star as possible. Now that being said, that doesn't mean that there aren't subtle differences. For example, axial tilt is different slightly. Um, the double moon system plays an outsized role in the tides, and especially the deep tides. Don't forget that the tides don't happen just on the surface; they happen all the way down as gravity affects that mass of water. Um, and I think the solar system in general has about 20% more orbiting matter in it than our solar system does. I'll have to go back and check, but Basically, there's a little bit more asteroid activity and a few more moons per gas giant than we usually get in our star system. But once I do get around to publishing the atlas, I will be publishing my specific numbers on each of those because the solar system will be one of the maps that we will be producing for that. Great question.
As a clarifying question from Gannon Dorky, I would normally bring them up, but it attaches to this so well.
Okay.
He would like to know, could we add on what kind of clock this has, year cycles and such?
Sure. I believe Calidor has a 344-day year, but the length of the day is around 26 hours, not 24, which is why the few times that it has been mentioned, Calidor has a 26-hour day, not a 24-hour day. That's actually arisen as a question from some of my editors at Podium when I've referenced that. Which means that all the ages that of the people that you're meeting are a little bit different than than human ages. It almost evens out, but I think it means that the people on Calidor are generally slightly older than their ages would be on Earth if you looked at the number of hours involved as opposed to just the year or even the months. So that's how I went with that.
Our next question comes from Dr. Zhivago.
We inviting people up, Manji, so they can speak.
I invited them to speak.
Hey,
There
I
we go.
asked two
Hey, Dr.
questions.
Oh, two
Sure, go
questions.
for it.
I signaled the one.
Okay, so
Wait, we could do two.
all right, first question is would you ever consider doing, like, when we go to Faris, like giving us some time of the boys like in the war originally, and kind of do like a low magic point of view?
That's going to be mentioned mostly in flashback. When Menelin gets to Faris, he's going to be experiencing a certain amount of PTSD from his formative violent experiences in life. And I will be describing and discussing the war magic that he cast during that period. And
That's
yeah, we'll be seeing a lot lower level of magic and very low key magic in a lot of ways, much more supportive than direct until we get to the point where it's basically the assault on the Mad Mage's citadel. And a discussion will be had about the advancement of magic since the war. As a matter of fact, it becomes a serious plot point. And your second question?
great answer, super interesting. Is who of Minilin's ancient memories is your favorite? Mine's Tuar Falauga, the sad scientist turned warrior.
That's one of them actually. He was the first of the kind of historic characters that I came up with. And great tragic backstory. Someone who is consumed in revenge, but who has an appreciation for intellectual concerns, especially astrophysics and quantum physics, and a greater understanding than we do because of his background and the advanced state of technology in the universe that he grew up in. I think one of my favorites actually is The Englishman. Um, that's for a couple of reasons. Yes, yes. He, I, I didn't want all of those memories to be heroic, and I wanted a couple of them to be properly problematic. And when Men is confronted with this part of his memory, his personality now, that's so very different from he is in character. someone who has invested a tremendous amount in his education, but who has essentially failed at life, and everything that the people around him see as important. Um, uh, that's a heavy burden to bear for men. And I play it for laughs. But the fact of the matter is that as much as it's bothersome, it's also incredibly useful to men sometimes too, as we'll be seeing across the course of Practical Adept. Um, uh, because the Englishman was completely classically trained and height of the British Empire style. Has a pretty good grasp of Latin, Greek, and even a little bit of Egyptian, ancient Egyptian. And he's well educated. He's just he's poorly culturated. He has some very uh, wild opinions that don't jive with his world, much less men's world. I think my second favorite character from that arc, um, uh, and at least to write, um, was the Prince. The Prince gives us some insight into the Alcalan as they are on Calidor, and really sets a high cultural standard. In a lot of ways, he's the polar opposite of the Englishman. Marlothus is as classically trained in his own culture as anyone, any of the other memories. Um, but he has a sense of refinement that I think really sets him apart from a lot of the other characters and brings a sense of understanding to Menelin that not of the a lot of the others do. Now, to kind of segue, the most hellish one to write, of course, is the monster. Uh, Azamathat is hard to write, because you're not just writing an alien, you're writing a crazy alien with unimaginable powers. And I had to really go Cthulhu on that one and channel my inner Clark Ashton Smith to bring that sort of thing alive as a character, as a meaningful character. So, but great question. I really enjoyed writing all of those, and they continue to influence men, and will have an even greater influence, especially throughout the course of the next book or so.
Okay. We're going to try to shift a little bit so we can get multiple people reading the questions and popping people up. Andrew, have you picked someone already?
I think Drummond has got a oh, go on, Andrew.
Say that again?
Is Andrew, is your mic working? We're not hearing
Oh,
you.
might be having a little problem there.
Okay. I think Drummond has put the most questions up.
Dromeda has quite a few, yes.
Should we get them up for a couple?
Should we get her up? Okay.
Really good ones. That's some really good ones. I want to know.
Okay. Invited her to speak. And Dave is absolutely breaking up, but
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
yes.
Hi, sorry for my metric fuck ton of questions. I'm very enthusiastic about this series.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, my most burning question out of the dozen I sent is whether or not the prison of the Narguleb is on the Green Moon, because I assume that they like conducted that mission where they threw a mountain at Calidor from space and were surprised by, you know, the Celestial Mother being able to basically, like keep that from being totally destructive, and then maybe surprised by the Metzkinsa.
Right. That's a great suggestion. But no, the Naglib, or however we end up pronouncing it. I really should think of these things while I'm writing. But They are not on the Green Moon. They are on Calidor. Um, they are in one of the prisons that was set up by Vundel. But they're kind of prison adjacent, I guess you could say. They're in one of the minor prisons. They are not the Formless. They are vassals of the Formless. And they are an aquatic species, or at least a species that can exist and survive in an aquatic environment. The Green Moon is inhabited, but it is, I can reveal this much, it's inhabited by the original remnants of the Mexicanza, who came to Calidor on the moon and then basically drop shipped themselves down to the planet's surface. But there are still some remnants up there on the Green Moon, which is one reason why it's green. Um, and the Green Moon will become vitally important to the story as it goes on. I started mentioning it a little bit more in Shadowblade, comes out in March. Just from a cultural perspective, because you can only see it from a more equatorial latitude. The further north you go, the lower it gets to the horizon, and eventually you can't see it at all. And so it has a number of roles mythologically and in folklore for the human population and the Elan population. But it was one of the few places that humanity was forbidden to go during the colonial period. And they, for the most part, respected that. They didn't care about the white moon, just the green moon. So uh, when they reached their agreement with the bundle, they left the green moon alone. Other
That's very
question?
interesting.
We have a
Good
question
afternoon,
from
Roger.
Googoflex. Say that again, Dave.
Roman have another one.
Oh, I can wait. I'm cool with waiting.
You had a lot, and I want to like pull them in, but I want to give others a chance.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna try to limit to like one or two, preferably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope you don't mind if we drop you in and get someone else and bring you back up.
Not at all.
I think we had Alex.
Thank you, Amanda.
Mm-hmm. Googoflex seems to have disappeared. Oh, that's awkward. We have Alex. Who,
Hi, Alex. Is your mic on? Oh, that's the exciting thing about live internet.
yeah. Yes. From Googoflex, let's go ahead and take his question. Hopefully, he gets to come back and hear the answer. Why doesn't humanity invent a god that had the power to move Calidor?
Good question. Mostly because humanity was largely unaware of the problem, and it was considered such a distant event that their primary concern was establishing a viable colony. They figured that their science would eventually take care of the uh, celestial problem, and they focused on getting their colony established. And of course, their colony decivilized, and they essentially enjoyed a brief civil war, slightly before they really had the colony as truly viable. And so with typical human short-sightedness, they focused on their own selfish survival as opposed to, and at the time that they were even intellectually aware of the issue, um, the they didn't understand magic well enough to appreciate just how bad things were going to get without it. They were still attacking or approaching the idea of magic from a purely quantum physics, consciousness interacting with the universe sort of thing, and didn't appreciate just how broad and deep magic affects everything on Calidor. Um, and kind of continuing with that, they didn't understand how the human subconscious played a role in the formation of the gods. It happened subconsciously. So they were really caught off guard by the appearance of these complex thought forms. And I guess from a scientific perspective, they didn't really believe it until it became so burdensome that they couldn't ignore it anymore. And it probably took centuries of magical research to establish that beyond theory. When we get to the book entitled Theurge, we will be going into some of the more nuts and bolts of divine magic and the origin and continued existence of the gods. Um, it's not without possibility that that could be done, but as we will learn, manifesting a divinity of any sort is not as simple or straightforward as it might appear. You're dealing with the collective human subconscious, which is a really messy place, and trying to control that at all is difficult. Trying to direct it is even more difficult. And again, I'm kind of couching that a little bit because that will also be a major plot point along the future arc, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but let's just say that doesn't mean that they won't try. But you can bet that the results will be range from hilarious to disastrous. So we'll just leave it at that.
We have Squirtle Squad, who doesn't have a mic right now, would like to ask, are there other current Humani settlements other than the five duchies around? They're not
Yeah,
super up to date, so they're just hoping to get that fleshed out a bit.
sure. And in Preceptor, I think Min mentions in passing, and in other places in the works, we've mentioned a few of the other settlements, Unstara being the primary one, the Shattered Isles, which are on the southern edge of the Shattered Sea. There's a lot of shattering going on there, and those two names actually come from the fact that the other part of the asteroid that created uh, the Jevelar in the north landed in the southern ocean more or less at the same time and devastated that whole, I guess, continental ridge that bordered the Shattered Sea, and really tossed around the uh, uh, geographic forms down there, both in the islands and where the Five Duchies is. Uh, but there's a smaller settlement directly to the east of Merwin on the other side of where Perwin was, called the Ten Kingdoms. Um, it's much smaller, more diverse in terms of cultural influences, I guess you could say. And some of those are directly descended from, for example, from the Colonial Defense Force, that when Perwin sank, the remnants of the Colonial Defense Force largely sailed east as opposed to west. And if not founded the Ten Kingdoms, certainly gave it a cultural shot in the arm that made it an actual viable colony. Now, beyond that, there are at least three other major settlements of humans on Calidor. Um, uh, Two of them in fairly remote areas. I think one is in the southern hemisphere, one is in the far west, and one is smack dab in the middle of the continent where the Elan really dominate. Um, and uh, we will be meeting each of those in turn, and they will have very different cultural and magical practices from the Five Duchies.
Okay. Our newest member, Dave, Spellwarden Cantankerous, did want to invite someone to speak. Do-do-do-do.
Is my
Did
wife
we
working?
Yeah,
get
we did.
named?
We did answer the Nagalib question regarding the Green Moon and everything. That was the person I was going to invite to speak. But we did have a person just ask a question. If you want me to just pull one from the chat just a moment ago.
Oh, I pulled up Moonwalker, who I thought was the one you were talking about. No?
All
Yep,
right, let's take one
Moonwalker's
from
the one.
Moonwalker, and then we'll take one from the chat.
Well, you answered my question about the Green Moon, but my other question that you called out was every few books where you're seeing you shift from Min's point of view, we get we get the boys, we'll get other people's point of views. What's the next book that's in the main line that's not going to be Min primary point of view?
Good question. It will probably be, and I'm glad you made the distinction, the mainline novels, because I will be doing 2 spin-off novels after book 17 that won't technically be mainline novels. One will feature Dara, and one will feature Rondell and Tyndall. But they won't be part of the serial mainline novel series. I think the next one will probably be book 18, and it'll probably be Pentandra, but don't write that down in pen because I love doing Pentandra books, but I have to be sparing with them because for one thing, her knowledge of prophecy makes things very hard to write now with her. But also, I every time I do a Pentandra book, everybody loves it, but they can't wait till I get back to men. And I think that if things play out the way that I'm planning on them playing out, by the time we get to book 18 or 19, it will essentially be required that Pentandra be main character of that particular novel. And we'll just have to wait and see exactly how things play out. Again, I have the entire series plotted, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily stick with that blueprint in detail. And there have been several times where I've shifted things around because I thought that it helped the flow of the series from book to book. But it probably will be a Pentandra novel as opposed to introducing a new character. But that'll be after I do a Tyndall and Rondell because the shouts saying a new Tyndall and Rondell book have just become overwhelming at this point, and so I feel I've got to indulge in that before I give Pentandra another spin.
We haven't exactly decided whom next. Sorry about that, Darrell.
Oh, not quite that quickly. I know some people complain that I'm not moving the plot forward quickly enough, but I want to make it worth getting to where I want to go. So I won't be throwing men into space probably till the 3rd decology. Someday.
I have this really good question I think we'll ask really quick. It comes from this guy, Dave the Arcanist. There seems to be a lot happening in the literary world. What are some of the things changing for authors in recent times? Are those good or bad?
That's my
Cool.
question. That's
I
my
know, something
question.
about this guy. He just seems to have an insightful question.
That's actually an excellent question. There's a lot going on in the publishing world right now. You're seeing the consolidation of the old, I guess, legacy publishing houses out there. You're seeing the um, uh, Amazon just being the 900-pound bear in the room when it comes to dictating what the publishing industry overall can do. Um, with audiobooks, Amazon is not just the platform, but they're also a publisher of audiobooks, which makes things really dicey if you're like I am, signed with another publishing agency who is competing with the guy who owns the platform. You have the Screenwriters Guild strike, which, believe it or not, does have an effect on the publishing industry. As I'm sure everybody is aware, a lot of the big audiovisual production houses out there um, are on the lookout for new properties coming in from the novel sphere, or manga, or anime, or whatever else, whatever they can get to sell. And then you have AI, which I will confess, I have played around with AI, not in anything that I published, but I just wanted to see its capabilities, see its suggestions. And at this stage of the art, I'm not terribly impressed with it in terms of a creative tool. I can see where it could be useful someday, but I think that it's still too unsophisticated to be able to replace me, for example. Um, but I think all of these things are conspiring to continue to change the publishing industry. And I was very fortunate that I got into self-publishing when I did, where I did. I was kind of at the right place at the right time, and had a fairly good idea of what the Kindle self-publishing platform would allow me to do, and the advantages it gave me, writing my own original stuff over uh, uh, trying to go with a traditional publisher. Um, and I'm very fortunate for that, but I also knew even at the time that not all things will last. And while this did do a lot for lowering the barrier of entry for good quality fiction, it also had a lot of potential for misuse, for transformation into something else, and it hasn't failed to disappoint. There have been a lot of evolutions in how Kindle, specifically, but self-publishing in general, has evolved over the last couple of years. Thankfully, I seem to be out ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. I think being prolific is one way um, that I can still stay popular. Um, One thing I've noticed is that the attention cycle of the average book reader um, is such that you don't have the 18 months you used to have when you published a book um, to focus on marketing and promotion and book signings and that sort of thing. Um, if you don't, if you're not out there with another work within 6 to 8 months, people start to lose interest, and you know. Uh, while my prose may not be the highest quality, or people may find issues with my character or plot, I think that just being at it on such a regular basis is in and of itself um, uh, important element of being a successful author of anything, fantasy or anything else. You've got to keep your iron hot, and always be working on the next thing before you finish the last thing. And if you fail to do that, then in a year, no one's going to remember. You're going to be that guy who wrote that book once. And if you want to avoid that and you want to stay relevant, you've got to continuously come up with new stuff, and stuff that's different from your old stuff. That's a big deal. None of my books, I think, are formulaic in any sort of way. There's not a Spellmonger formula the way there are formulas for other series. Dresden Files is an excellent example. I really enjoyed the first couple, but I found that even though he was doing interesting things with the characters, it just got a little formulaic after a while, and I lost interest. And I'm really trying. Even if I write a book that you don't like, it won't be because it was just like the last book. It'll be a whole new reason not to like it. You know, some experiment that I did that you were dissatisfied with, like a lot of people were with Mad Mage of Sevendor, because of uh, the journalistic approach that I took to it. Um, but you know, not all experiments work, but not all experiments fail in the way you think they're going to fail. And I think Mad Mage and some of my other experiments uh, won't be repeated necessarily, but that doesn't mean that they weren't good attempts at creating a variation on the theme that I played themes that I played around with for the entire series. Hope
Okay.
that
Now
answers your question.
we have Alex here who
Hello,
has
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
yes.
now, Alex.
Yeah, nice. Hello, everyone. I have two questions. The first one, will Min track all the living parent check using the Phaser spell that Anthony used and send groups of magi to clear them, with the exception of the undead parent check, of course, and maybe even locate Corval based on the parent check population density on the map?
Interesting idea. Probably not, because of the events in Preceptor. The Paranchak are not the force that they were at the beginning of Preceptor. Um, uh, they're going to take some time, have to take some time to regroup, and I think you'll find that a lot of the Enshadowed kind of lost faith in the new super weapon when it was countered so handily by the Magi. But that is an interesting idea. The thing is, they know where Corball is. He's in a hole in a devastated island on the edge of the continent, and it's going to take a lot to come back from that level of defeat. Um, that being said, I also think that the threats that Minolin is going to face in the near term are going to be a lot more derivative of Corball as the Enshadowed kind of splinter off into various groups and individuals who think that they can take advantage of this kind of interregnum period while Corball is licking his wounds. And some of them will use the Paranchak, some of them will use the Gravani, uh, uh, some of them will turn to entirely new and unique soldiery to advance their individual goals. So, but that is an intriguing concept. I'll keep that in mind.
May I ask another question? Will Taran ask Lelastian, like Carmelity, to become Terra alone or Alka alone as a gesture of love to Varen? And will he and Carmel and maybe other Magi will take over the arcane orders after Min is dead, let's say in a few decades, when because of their long lifespan?
That's another intriguing concept, and it's more complicated than that. As we finish up with Preceptor and we head into the next couple of books, the Alcalan question in general is going to become much more acute. Um, and without spoiling anything, that yes, that's one of the issues is that an increased lifespan for these transgenically enchanted members of humanity or members of the Alcalan, that's going to be a problem and a factor for how the Alan deal with the Humani. And again, it's not going to go the way anybody expected or planned for it to go. Largely because of stuff that Min does, um, and threats that he makes and all that good stuff. But your basic question is spot on. Yes, that's going to alter the balance of power and muddy the loyalties of everybody involved in some ways that are going to make life hell for a lot of people, but make a really intriguing story for the rest of us.
Okay, we're getting Sid on for the next one. Just Sid. Hopefully. If they aren't able to use their mic, hopefully they will let me know. I've told them twice they were coming up here. I didn't hear anything against it. Okay. As they're not popping in, did the colonists know about the approaching end of Calendar when they asked to settle?
Theoretically, yes. Meaning that some of them did. When we go back and examine how the colony was founded and how it evolved, especially in the early days, just like any place else, you have the elite intelligentsia that has access to more data than everybody else. And so when they were told, oh, by the way, in 3,000 years, the world's probably going to end, that was still within their colonial parameters and was seen as a fixable problem. Or even if it wasn't, if magic goes away, that doesn't really impact our colony. Maybe everybody else dies, but we're human. We'll be fine. We don't need magic. Without really having a understanding of the complex way that magic facilitates life on Calidor in the first place. Again, it was a matter of being short-sighted and focusing on establishing a viable human colony on a world that fit 98% of the requirements for a good human colony. And this whole issue actually will become a very important one as we deconstruct how the colony deconstructed, um, and the motives of the forces involved in sending the New Horizons way, closing the space colonies, and eventually sinking Perwin. Um, and that the whole idea of the viability of the human colony versus 3,000 years from colonization with something that may or may not happen, and we'll kick it down the road and let our descendants deal with it. That was really the most important part. But they technically they did know. It just wasn't widely or really public knowledge. It was considered, if not classified, at least sensitive information that really only the elite of the colony were cognizant of, and no one, even amongst the elite, were really worrying about it. Well, yeah, but they had a technical workaround, which was the establishment of what's known as a solil, which is basically a shield built in space, in geosynchronous orbit above the planet that would have had a similar effect, although not as comprehensive as the bundle shield.
I have another one here from Anubis Obituary. Hopefully he'll be able to join us.
Hey everybody, how you guys doing? Thank you
Hey, Anubis.
for picking my question, man. Terry, huge honor. What if I was just wondering if you're gonna publish another like short story set of series that told the story of how Ruderall joined in Rondel and Tyndall in the Land of Scars, and how that whole the finding of Corbal's tomb thing went.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the most frequent questions I get asked, and the short answer is yes. I'm working on it. I'm working on it with my youngest son in Literary Air, as his first novel. He actually formulated the character of Ruderall, and kind of gave it to me. He's wicked creative. He really is. Takes after his dad, and um, does a great job with story and character. He is a fanatical gamer, and growing up in my house, he has the vocabulary well, he had the vocabulary of a college student in middle school. This was a problem. Um, when he could debate with his teachers on their level, and do it for effect. We had a lot of very interesting teacher conferences back then. But we are working on the novel. He is still in school, so it's a kind of start stop sort of thing. He wants to get completely caught up on the series before he plunges into it. But that book will be written. I don't know if it'll be called Ruderall or Sea Mage or some variation of that. But I think it'll tell the story, basically Rudy's backstory and the whole sequence of events in the Land of Scars, including the perspective from the perspective of some of the villains involved. But I don't want to push him too hard too fast and get him soured on the idea of writing, because if I get hit by a bus, he's all you got. Um, and so I want to bring him along slowly and gently and eventually fill that hole. There's a whole list of stories that I want to write uh, that I haven't written simply because I've had more compelling things to write. Um, but for example, a short story featuring Pentandra going through the Kasari rites is one that I'm particularly interested in writing. Um, Tyndall and Rondel in the Land of Scars is one that I'm interested in writing. Lalastian during the early colonization is one that I want to write. It's not that I don't have material. It's just a matter of putting it out in the proper order, and with the um, uh, I guess the right. I want to handle it very carefully. Each of those, none of them are tremendously important to the storyline, but they are important to the character development of each of those particular characters. And they do play a role in the evolving plot, but um, I want to go ahead and hit the high points first, and then back over the rest of it if I have to.
We should be looking for a Kasari anthology, is what you're telling us.
Well, yes, there's definitely going to be not just the Kasari anthology. The next true young adult trilogy that I want to do will be featuring a Kasari troop, basically, a Kasari patrol. It'll be set at the beginning of the Gravani invasion, um, contemporary with Spellmonger and War Mage. And it will feature Nadia's brother, Travid, before he gets sent to Angskabel. And Fonderol the Wise will be a major character in that as well. And that'll
Have you
be a
released
trilogy.
the name for that? Have you released the name for that yet?
The first book of that trilogy will be Windmaster. Um,
Oh,
that
cool.
that being Travid's kind of sport power, and we'll get to see what happens to someone who gets Rajira in a culture that doesn't really know how to handle Rajira, and the decisions that he'll have to make, which will be great from a young adult perspective. That's one reason why I really enjoy young adult novels in general, is that we not only get a coming of age story, but we also get usually an exploration of a specific culture. The Westwoods culture that I did with Dara, the House of Shadows culture I did with the Legacy and Secrets in Gatina. you really get to examine a part of the world in depth with the young adult novels. And the Kasari are amongst my favorites, so I really want to do that one justice.
Our next one is coming from Spartan DNA. I did want to ask what I think is possibly a rapid fire one that from someone who has no mic. From
Sure.
Corbel's Bane. Especially with the reemergence of Isserley, has Min decided what he will tell the Greenflower children about their mother?
Oh, hell no. Are you kidding? Min is in a state of shock right now. This was literally the last thing he expected. And it really throws a major wrench in his overall plans, not to mention makes a complete hash of his personal life. Uh, it's one thing um, to have your ex-girlfriend come back from the dead, but when she's also your rapist and the mother of two of your children who you have a genuine affection and affinity for, um, we got some serious emotions going on in men, and that was one of the things that that storyline originally would have happened slightly earlier in the book, and been expounded upon a little bit more if I had taken it all the way to 45 or 50 chapters. But I'm glad I didn't, because I think it from a story perspective, it has more of an effect being popped up at the last minute, totally out of the blue, and really, like I said, throws a wrench in a lot of men's plans. He's going to have to, first of all, figure out how he feels, uh, what to do with Italy, and then figure out what to tell the kids. That it's not, sadly, his highest priority. His highest priority is to keep Italy from causing more trouble, and wrecking his plans, than than he figured. So, um, but I'm actually quite happy with that particular chapter, and thought I handled the character pretty well in the face of everything that he's had to deal with. But yeah, she'll be a major plot point moving forward, and Men's, I guess, divided loyalty, um, or just straight up PTSD from that whole experience is going to have a dramatic impact on how he responds to that particular turn of events. And would you kill your ex-girlfriend if you had the opportunity? He could get away with it. It certainly crossed his mind. But it's going to challenge his idea of an ideal of wisdom, what to do with Italy. And he's got a lot of voices in his head who are telling him a lot of different things, and he's got essentially to figure out which one of those voices he's going to pay attention to. Well, yeah, that relationships are complicated, Craig.
We're all staggered.
Yeah. Go ahead, Spartan.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, Terry, to speak with you. You're awesome. Everything you do
Well,
is
thank
awesome.
I
Your
appreciate that.
storylines are so detailed that, as the questions have shown, we can all ask questions in totally different directions for hours, because there's so much to go off, and you touch on so many different things. I was going to focus tonight mostly on the Vandal though, because
Okay.
I was worried about all of that kind of coming to head. And then in this book, you did a really great smackdown by the Handmaiden. I thought that was done perfectly. The way she just knocked them in their place was just beautiful. Loved that. But I'm wondering about the Conclave. When is it going to be flushed out a little more, where he's going to get the big fish in a room and be able to really hit home what his plan is and present it to the actual Vandal?
Good question. The short answer is it'll be a couple of books. Um, we haven't even met a bundle yet. We've seen one in flashback, and that was a Leviathan. In case you haven't guessed this yet, the Vundel are a metamorphic species. They go through several different phases. Kind of like Dr. Zoidberg from Futurama. His species does the same thing, and it's just a coincidence that they're both kind of crustacean-like. But one of the things when I plotted out how I wanted to do the introduction of the Vundel is I did want them to be kind of offstage powers, you know. The great thing about the Star Wars movie is that the Emperor is mentioned a lot of times, but you don't really see him at all until the second movie, and he's just this continuous offstage bad guy. And I wanted to kind of cultivate the same sort of thing with the Vundel. We will actually, I'll have a character actually meet a Vundel briefly in Shadowblade, and beyond that, I can promise that there will be a direct encounter between Minilin and one of the Vundel in Practical Addict while he's in Paris. And I probably telegraphed it all over the place with how I wrote the Mudrost storyline and Preceptor. But yeah, there'll be a bit of a showdown, and yes, the Handmaiden is going to be essential in how Men continues to deal with the Vundel. And she'll be both a valuable tool and because don't forget, she comes from a completely different phase in their evolution, where the Vundel, as we know them, were fairly lowly compared to the Celestial Mothers and the Great Mothers and the other hierarchy of uh, the intelligent aquatic species of Calidor. So we're and honestly, the Celestial Mothers that's in the Snowflake, she's from an even different period, more closely related to the Handmaidens, but from a different epic entirely. So there's going to be a lot going on, and how we're going to see that evolve is going to be important. But it'll be the third decology before Minilin is able to take the Celestial Mothers, that last egg, to the Conclave. And we'll learn a lot more about the Vundel before that, and understand and appreciate just how important the Conclave is for a species that doesn't really see you as an adult until you're half a mile long and have lived for 100,000 years already. It'll be there'll be some difficulties in communication. Let's just say that. Excellent question. Yeah, it's going to be a shit show at various points, depending on where they came from and what they were. The human magi have been very cavalier with just who they stuck in what magical artifact. Uh, and that's going to be a problem moving forward, especially when you start to get some pushback from your magical weapons and tools. And when you have some that are relatively peaceful but have been put into a situation to be used as a weapon, and some who are um, terribly useful, but in terms of their ability to control a magical item, but may very well have their own, I guess, perspectives on how that magic should be used and who is properly in charge. Nope, nope, as in real life.
Okay. We've been going for an hour. I assume you're not ready to tap out yet on us. But I
Nah,
want to
I
check
got
if we need to take like a quick 5-minute break. Anything you need?
I would not mind that. If nothing else, I need more ice in my whiskey. So
Okay.
sure, let's take 5, and everybody get your questions ready. I'll be right back. Everybody else take a biological break.
We
As needed.
have 2 people next, so we're good to go. But we'll take a quick 5-minute break. Everyone, just use the restrooms. Give a good stretch break, water. Go ahead.
Great.
Amanda, you have so many questions. I want to get to all of them. It is, oof.
It's okay. That's honestly, that's just the list of questions I decided were important enough to submit today. I've got a spreadsheet, man. Like,
Every time these come up, it's like I have so many things I'd like to ask on, and it's what do you prioritize? Really, it comes down to it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
we came into this. We have several questions we have on like back burner in case like anything slows down, but you all are doing so well that I don't think we're going to reach very many of them.
yeah. Yeah, I've already listened to Preceptor twice.
Mhm.
Yeah.